My name's Jack, a 38-year-old trucker from Tulsa, Oklahoma. For over a decade, I've hauled freight across this great country, chasing that American dream, the kind where you work hard, carve your own path, and build something real for your family. There's a freedom in trucking, just you, the open road, and the hum of a diesel engine under the stars. It's a life that tests your grit, but it's honest work, the kind that makes you feel like you're part of the backbone of America. My wife, Sarah, and I have been saving every penny for a house, a place to call our own after years of renting. But in the fall of 2021, on a lonely stretch of old Route 66 in New Mexico, that dream turned into a nightmare that still haunts me, one I'll never shake no matter how many miles I put behind me. I was hauling a load of auto parts from Tulsa to Flagstaff, Arizona, a run I'd done so many times I could probably drive it blindfolded. Route 66 is a trucker's paradise. Wide, open highways winding through deserts and ghost towns, dotted with neon-lit diners and rusted relics of America's golden age. It's the kind of road that makes you feel connected to the past, to the folks who built this country mile by mile. That night, it was around 2 a.m., and the desert was quieter than a church on Monday. The stars burned bright overhead, like a million tiny headlights in the sky. But down on the ground, it was pitch black. My Peterbilt's headlights were my only guide, cutting a narrow path through the darkness. They'd been dim for months, and I'd been putting off fixing them. Money was too tight, and every dollar went to the house fund. Usually it wasn't a big deal, but out here, with no other cars for miles, I had to squint to make out the road's edges. It was like driving into a void. I'd been on the road for nearly 12 hours fighting the weight of exhaustion. Sarah's voice was in my head telling me to take it easy, but stopping meant losing time, and time was money we didn't have. We were so close to that down payment, I could taste it, a little ranch-style house with a yard for our future kids. So I cranked up the classic rock on the radio, Leonard Skynerd's Sweet Home Alabama filling the cab, and popped open a Monster energy drink. The caffeine hit like a jolt, but it wasn't enough to shake the fog in my brain. I rubbed my eyes, trying to stay sharp, when something caught my attention up ahead. A figure stood on the shoulder, thumb out, barely visible in the dim glow of my headlights. It was an older guy, maybe 60, dressed in a faded flannel shirt, worn jeans, and a cowboy hat tilted low over his eyes. He looked like he'd stepped out of an old western, a drifter who belonged to the road itself. Hitchhikers aren't common out here. Most folks know better than to stand on a desert highway in the dead of night, but I've always believed in lending a hand. It's what keeps communities strong, what makes America what it is. You help your neighbor even if they're a stranger. Besides, I figured he might be a trucker down on his luck, and I know how brutal this life can be. So I slowed the rig, the air brakes hissing as I pulled onto the gravel shoulder, kicking up a cloud of dust that swirled in the headlights. The guy climbed into the cab, moving slow, like his joints ached from years of hard living. The door creaked shut, and a faint smell hit me. Motor oil mixed with something sour like old leather left out in the rain. "Thanks, partner," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "Need to get to Gallup, about 40 miles west." His name was Ray, he told me, a former trucker who'd fallen on hard times after his rig broke down a few miles back. His story tugged at me. I'd seen too many good men lose everything to a blown engine or a bad contract. I nodded, told him I was headed that way, and offered him a bottle of water from my cooler. He waved it off, settling into the passenger seat with a sigh, his cowboy hat casting a shadow across his face. As we rolled back onto the highway, Ray got talkative, spinning stories about his days hauling freight in the 80s. He spoke of cross-country runs, greasy diners, and the camaraderie of truck stops before cell phones and GPS changed everything. It was the kind of talk that made me nostalgic for a time I'd never lived, a reminder of why I loved this job despite the long hours and aching back. But as the miles ticked by, his stories took a darker turn. He started talking about a ghost load he'd carried back in '89, pallets of unmarked crates that showed up on his manifest out of nowhere. No labels, no paperwork, he said, staring out the windshield into the black desert. Dropped him at a warehouse in Arizona, but when I opened the trailer to unload, they were gone, vanished. The company thought I stole them, fired me on the spot. His voice grew quieter, almost a whisper. I saw those crates disappear, Jack, right out of my rig at a rest stop near here. I chuckled, thinking he was pulling my leg with some old trucker's tale, the kind we tell to pass the time. But Ray didn't laugh. His eyes were fixed on the road, cold and unblinking, like he was seeing something I couldn't. I shifted in my seat, the cab suddenly feeling smaller. The radio crackled, cutting to static before kicking back into Freebird. I tried to change the subject, asking about his plans in Gallup, but he just muttered, "Gotta settle something," and clammed up. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional gust of desert wind rattling the cab. About 20 miles later, Ray pointed to a turnoff up ahead, an old gas station that looked like it hadn't seen a customer since the Eisenhower administration. Rusted pumps stood like tombstones, their hoses long gone. And the windows were boarded up, splintered wood peeling under the moonlight. "Pull over here," he said. "Gotta grab something." My gut twisted. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, stopping felt like a bad idea. But Ray's voice had an edge, like he wasn't asking. And I didn't want to leave him stranded. So I eased the rig onto the cracked pavement, the tires crunching over broken glass. Ray hopped out, his boots hitting the ground with a thud, and walked toward the back of the station, disappearing into the shadows without a word. I waited, engine idling, the clock on the dash ticking past 2:30 a.m. 5 minutes turned to 10, then 15. No sign of Ray. The desert was dead quiet. No crickets, no wind, just an oppressive stillness that made my skin crawl. I tried calling out for him, my voice echoing off the abandoned building, but got nothing back. My instincts screamed to drive away, but abandoning someone went against everything I believed in. Sarah always said my heart was bigger than my brain, and maybe she was right. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove box, a heavy mag light that doubled as a club, and stepped out into the cool night air. The station was a wreck, the kind of place you'd expect to find in a horror movie. Broken glass littered the ground, glinting in my flashlight's beam, and the air smelled of dust and decay. I called for Ray again, my voice sounding small in the vast emptiness. No answer. I circled the building, my boots crunching louder than I liked, and found a trap door behind a pile of old tires, its rusted hinges barely holding it together. My heart pounded. Every horror story I'd ever heard told me to walk away. But curiosity, or maybe stupidity, pulled me forward. I lifted the trap door, the screech of metal piercing the silence, and shone my light down. A rickety ladder led into a dark cellar, the air thick with the stench of mildew and something metallic like blood. I hesitated, my hand tightening around the flashlight. "Ray?" I called, my voice barely above a whisper. Nothing. Against every ounce of common sense, I climbed down, the ladder creaking under my weight. The cellar was cramped, barely tall enough to stand in, and my flashlight revealed stacks of wooden crates just like Ray had described. Unmarked, covered in dust and cobwebs, some splintered like they'd been pried open and abandoned. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't right. No one stores anything in a place like this, not in the middle of the desert. I stepped closer, my light catching something carved into one of the crates. A symbol, like a circle with a jagged line through it, crude but deliberate. It sent a chill down my spine, like I'd stumbled onto something I wasn't meant to see. A noise above me, a soft thud, like footsteps on gravel, snapped me out of it. I swung the flashlight up, half expecting to see Ray, but the cellar was empty except for me and those damn crates. My pulse raced, the air feeling thicker, heavier, like the walls were closing in. I scrambled up the ladder, my hands slick with sweat, and slammed the trap door shut. Back outside, the station looked the same, but the silence was deafening now, pressing against my eardrums. I jogged to my truck, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly, and that's when the CB radio crackled to life. "Jack, don't take the load." The voice was Ray's, but wrong, distorted, like it was being filtered through water or static, low and guttural. I froze, my hand on the truck's door handle. The CB was off. I hadn't touched it since we stopped. "Leave it, or you'll never leave." The voice hissed again, clearer this time, each word dripping with menace. I yanked the door open, jumped into the cab, and locked it, my hand shaking as I turned the key. The engine roared to life, and I threw the truck into gear, peeling out onto Route 66, the gas station shrinking in my rearview mirror. As I sped away, I glanced back, and I swear on my life I saw a figure standing by the pumps, cowboy hat tilted low, just watching me go. It was Ray, or something that looked like him, motionless, his silhouette swallowed by the darkness as my headlights faded. My heart hammered in my chest, the monster energy long forgotten. I pushed the rig harder than I should have, the speedometer creeping past 70, the desert blurring by. I didn't care about tickets or blowouts. I just wanted distance between me and that place. The rest of the drive to Gallup was a blur. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see headlights chasing me, but the road stayed empty. When I finally pulled into the delivery yard at dawn, my hands were still trembling. I climbed out, the morning sun harsh after the endless night, and went to check the trailer. My stomach dropped. One of the auto part crates was missing. Not damaged, not tampered with, just gone. The trailer's lock was intact, the seals unbroken. I reported it to the yard manager, a grizzled guy named Hank who'd heard every excuse in the book. He didn't believe me. Said I must have miscounted or someone broke in without leaving a trace. It cost me a week's pay, money Sarah and I couldn't afford to lose. But I didn't argue. How do you explain something like that? I called Sarah from the road, told her a watered-down version of the story. Just a weird hitchhiker, nothing about voices or vanishing crates. She told me to come home safe, her voice soft but worried. I could hear her dreaming of that house, of the life we were building, and it grounded me. But I haven't taken Route 66 at night since. I got the headlights fixed, took a loan to cover the lost pay, and kept trucking. The American dream doesn't come easy, and I'm too stubborn to quit. But sometimes when I'm alone on a dark highway, the CB crackles with static, and I hear that voice again, warning me about a load I'll never understand. I check my mirrors, grip the wheel, and pray I never see that gas station or Ray again. My name's Mike, 42 years old, a trucker out of Memphis, Tennessee. I've been driving rigs for nearly 15 years, ever since I left the Army after 2 tours in Iraq. The military taught me duty, discipline, and how to keep moving forward no matter what. And I've carried that into trucking. It's a grind, but it's honest work, the kind that lets me provide for my 2 kids, Emma and Ethan, and keep a roof over our heads. In the summer of 2023, I was hauling a load of furniture from Memphis to Columbus, Ohio, along a quiet stretch of US 25 in Kentucky. It was supposed to be a straightforward run, but what happened that night shook me to my core, testing everything I believe about honor, instinct, and reality itself. It was just past midnight, and I was deep in the back roads of Kentucky, where the highways cut through dense forests and rolling hills. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, carried on a warm breeze that drifted through my cracked window. My radio was tuned to a country station, Merle Haggard's Mama Tried playing low, keeping me company as the miles ticked by. I was ahead of schedule, a rare treat in this job, which meant I'd get home to my kids a day early. Emma was turning 10 that weekend, and I'd promised her a trip to the zoo, a promise I was determined to keep. That thought kept me going even as my eyelids grew heavy from hours behind the wheel. The road was empty, the kind of quiet that feels like the world's holding its breath. My headlights swept across the asphalt, illuminating faded lane markers and the occasional road sign. I was sipping on a lukewarm coffee, trying to stay sharp, when I saw her. A woman standing on the shoulder, waving her arms like her life depended on it. She wore a white dress that seemed to glow in the beams, her dark hair tangled and wild. My first thought was a car accident. Out here, far from any town, a breakdown could leave you stranded for hours. I'd seen enough wrecks in my time to know people need help fast, and my army training kicked in. You don't leave someone behind. So I eased the rig onto the gravel shoulder, the tires crunching as I came to a stop. She climbed into the cab, her movements quick and jerky like she was running from something. "Thank you," she gasped, her voice trembling as she hugged herself, shivering despite the warm night. "My car broke down a mile back. I need to get to Moorhead." Her name was Emily, she said, a nurse heading home after a late shift at a hospital. She looked about 30, with pale skin and dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't slept in days. Her hands kept fidgeting, twisting the hem of her dress, and she wouldn't meet my gaze, staring out the passenger window instead. I chalked it up to nerves. Being stranded in the middle of nowhere would rattle anyone. I offered her a bottle of water from my cooler, but she shook her head, muttering something about not being thirsty. I pulled back onto the highway, the rig's engine rumbling as we picked up speed. To break the silence, I asked her about herself, figuring small talk might calm her down. She said she'd been a nurse for years, working long hours to support her family. "It's all for them," she said softly. "My parents, my little brother, they're all I've got." Her words hit home. I'm all about family too. Everything I do is for Emma and Ethan, to give them the life I never had growing up. I told her about my kids, how Emma loves animals and Ethan's obsessed with baseball. For a moment, she seemed to relax, even smiling faintly as she listened. But as we drove deeper into the night, her stories took a darker turn. She started talking about a patient she'd lost, a kid who'd been in a car wreck. "He was only 12, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. "Head-on collision. I tried to save him, but he was gone before we got him to surgery. Sometimes I hear his voice calling out to me, especially on nights like this, on empty roads." A chill ran through me, not just from her words, but from the way she said them, like she was confessing a secret she'd carried too long. I glanced at her, and for a split second, her face looked wrong. Her features seemed to blur, like a smudged photograph. Her eyes too dark, her mouth too thin. I blinked hard, blaming the long hours and dim light. When I looked again, she was normal, staring out the window, her hands still twisting that dress. The road stretched on, the forest closing in on both sides, trees looming like silent sentinels. My CB radio crackled faintly, but no voices came through, just static, sharp and grating. I tried to shake off the unease, focusing on the yellow lines ahead. Emily asked about my time in the army, and I shared a few stories. Nothing heavy, just enough to keep the conversation going. But every time I looked at her, she seemed more distant, her answers shorter, her voice softer, like she was fading into the seat. "You ever feel like you're being watched out here?" she asked suddenly, her eyes fixed on the darkness outside. I laughed it off, saying it was just the road playing tricks, but my skin prickled. I'd felt that before, on lonely stretches like this, like eyes were on me from the shadows. We were about 10 miles from Moorhead when she asked me to drop her at a gas station just off the highway. "My brother's meeting me there," she said, her voice flat now, almost mechanical. I nodded, relieved to have a destination. The station came into view, its neon sign flickering, casting an eerie glow over the empty lot. I pulled in, the rig's brakes hissing, and Emily opened the door. "Thank you, Mike," she said, her eyes meeting mine for the first time. They were deep, almost too deep, like looking into a well. She stepped out, her white dress catching the light as she walked toward the station. I watched her go, expecting her to head inside, but when I blinked, she was gone. Not inside, not around the corner, gone like she'd vanished into the air. My stomach twisted. I climbed out, my boots hitting the pavement with a thud, and scanned the lot. The station was quiet, the only sound the hum of the neon sign and the distant chirp of crickets. I checked behind the building along the road, even the ditch. Nothing. The clerk inside, a bored-looking kid in his 20s, said no one had come in all night. "Just you, man," he said, barely looking up from his phone. I drove back to where I'd picked her up, thinking maybe she'd walked back to her car, but there was no car, no tire marks, no sign of a breakdown, just an empty stretch of road, the forest silent under the moonlight. I finished the run to Columbus, my mind racing. I couldn't shake the image of Emily's face. That moment it seemed to blur, or the way her voice had sounded so hollow. When I got to the delivery yard, I parked and pulled out my phone, searching for any clue about what I had experienced. On a hunch, I looked up nurses named Emily in Moorhead. What I found made my blood run cold. An obituary from 2019 for an Emily Carter, a 32-year-old nurse killed in a hit and run on US 25. The photo was her. Same dark hair, same pale skin, same white dress. The article mentioned she'd been haunted by a patient's death, a 12-year-old boy from a car wreck she couldn't save. It was like reading my own memory, word for word. I sat in the cab, staring at the screen, my hands shaking. I don't believe in ghosts. I'm a practical guy, grounded in what I can see and touch. But I couldn't explain this. I called my ex-wife, Lisa, and told her I'd be home for Emma's birthday. But I didn't mention Emily. I didn't want her to think I was losing it. When I got back to Memphis, I hugged my kids a little tighter, grateful for the life we're building, the family that keeps me going. I still drive US 25 when the job calls for it, but never at night. Every time I pass that stretch, I check the passenger seat, half expecting to see Emily there, staring into the dark, her hands twisting that white dress. And sometimes, when the radio cuts to static, I swear I hear a faint whisper, like a voice calling from a place I'll never understand. My name's Tom, 50 years old, a trucker from Lincoln, Nebraska. For 25 years, I've hauled everything from grain to machinery across the Midwest, building a life through sweat and determination. This land, its wide open plains and endless fields, is the heart of America, and I take pride in delivering the tools that keep our farmers going. It's honest work, the kind that binds communities together, and I've always believed in doing my part. But in January 2024, on a foggy night in Iowa's corn country, I encountered something that shook my faith in the road and left me questioning what's real. It was a night that tested my resilience and still haunts me, no matter how many miles I drive to outrun it. I was hauling a load of farm equipment, tractors and plows, from Omaha to a depot near Des Moines, a run I'd done countless times. It was a chilly Tuesday evening, the kind where the cold seeps into your bones, and a freak fog had rolled in, thick as soup, blanketing the highway in a gray haze. My headlights barely pierced it, casting a feeble glow that illuminated only a few feet of asphalt ahead. The CB radio was eerily quiet. No chatter from other truckers, which was unusual for this busy corridor. Most drivers avoid fog like this, but I was determined to make the delivery on time. Farmers rely on guys like me to keep their operations running, and I wasn't about to let them down. Besides, I'd driven through worse. Blizzards, thunderstorms, you name it. I figured I could handle a little fog. The clock on the dash read 10:15 p.m., and I was running on fumes, both fuel and energy. I'd been up since dawn, loading the trailer myself to save time, and the exhaustion was catching up. My thermos of coffee was long empty, and the heater in my old Kenworth was struggling to keep the cab warm. I rubbed my eyes, trying to stay sharp, and turned up the radio, some old Johnny Cash, Ring of Fire, to keep me grounded. The fog seemed to swallow the sound, making the cab feel smaller, like the world outside had vanished. I was alone on the highway, the only signs of life the occasional mile marker looming out of the mist like a ghost. Then my CB crackled, cutting through the quiet with a burst of static. A voice came through, faint and garbled. "Help! Stuck! Mile marker 47!" It sounded like a trucker in trouble, maybe jackknifed or broken down in the fog. My heart rate picked up. Out here, a stranded driver could freeze or worse if help didn't come quick. I grabbed the mic and responded. "This is Tom on 80, near mile marker 45. What's your situation?" No answer, just more static, sharp, and grating, like nails on a chalkboard. I tried again, adjusting the channel, but got nothing. Then the voice came through again, clearer this time, laced with panic. "Hurry, they're here." My stomach dropped. Who's they? A wreck, a robbery, something worse, I called out again. But the line went dead, leaving only the hum of the engine and Cash's voice fading into the fog. I was near mile marker 45, just a couple miles from 47. My instincts screamed to keep driving. Fog like this was no place to play hero, but I couldn't ignore a call for help. It's what we do out here, truckers looking out for each other, a brotherhood forged on the road. It's part of what makes America strong, that sense of community, of not leaving a man behind. So I slowed the rig, creeping through the fog, my eyes straining to spot anything, a truck, a wreck, a person. The air felt heavy, oppressive, like the fog was pressing down on the cab, muffling everything. My headlights flickered, dimming for a moment before snapping back, and I cursed the old wiring I'd been meaning to fix. When I reached mile marker 47, I saw it. A rig pulled off to the side, half in a ditch, its trailer tilted at an odd angle. No lights, no hazard flashers, just a dark shape swallowed by the fog. It was a beat-up Freightliner, its paint chipped and rusted, looking like it hadn't moved in days. I parked as close as I dared, the gravel crunching under my tires, and grabbed my flashlight, a heavy-duty one I kept for emergencies. I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" My voice sounded flat, absorbed by the fog, and got no response. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the faint drip of condensation from the corn stalks lining the road. I stepped out, the cold air biting through my jacket, and approached the truck, my boots sinking slightly into the damp ground. The Freightliner's driver's door was ajar, swaying slightly as if caught by a breeze I couldn't feel. I knocked, calling out again, but the cab was empty. Inside was a mess. Papers scattered across the seat, a half-eaten burger rotting in a wrapper, an empty soda can on the floor. The keys dangled in the ignition, but the engine was cold, like it hadn't run in hours. My flashlight beam swept the interior, catching a faded photo taped to the dash. A man, maybe 40, smiling with a kid on his shoulders. It tugged at me. Family's what keeps me going, too. But the scene felt wrong, like I'd stumbled into someone's life mid-sentence. Then I heard it, a low hum, like machinery or a distant generator coming from the cornfield across the road. It was steady, rhythmic, vibrating through the fog. I shone my flashlight, but the beam barely penetrated the mist, illuminating only a few rows of stalks, their leaves glistening with dew. The hum grew louder, pulsing in my ears, and I swear I saw movement. tall, thin shapes shifting between the corn, too quick to make out. They didn't look human, their outlines jagged, almost mechanical. My heart pounded, my breath visible in the cold air. I'm no coward. 25 years on the road toughens you up. But this wasn't right. I backed toward my truck, keeping my light on the field, my hand gripping the flashlight like a weapon. As I reached my rig, the CB in the abandoned freightliner crackled to life, the sound slicing through the fog. "You shouldn't have come," the voice said, the same one from before. But now it sounded amused, almost mocking, with a strange echo that made my skin crawl. I froze, my eyes darting to the empty cab. No one was there. The voice continued, low and deliberate. "Leave now, or stay forever." Panic surged through me, my army training kicking in. Assess, act, survive. I sprinted to my truck, yanked the door open, and locked it behind me, my hands shaking as I turned the key. The engine roared, and I peeled out, the tires kicking up gravel as I merged back onto the highway. The hum followed me, faint at first, then louder, like it was keeping pace with the truck. I pushed the rig to 60, faster than was safe in the fog, my eyes glued to the road. The CB crackled again, static bursting through the speakers, and that voice came back. "You can't outrun them." I slammed my fist on the dash, shouting at the radio to shut up, but it kept going, looping the same phrase until I ripped the mic cord out. The hum faded as I hit a clear stretch of road about 10 miles later, the fog thinning enough to see the stars again. I didn't stop until I reached a truck stop outside Des Moines, my hands still trembling as I parked under the bright fluorescent lights. I called the state police from the truck stop, my voice shaky as I explained what I'd seen. The abandoned rig, the voice, the hum. They sent a patrol to mile marker 47 and found the freightliner just as I'd described. But no driver, no tracks, no sign of anyone. The truck had been reported stolen a week earlier from a lot in Missouri, and the cops had no leads on who'd been driving it. They couldn't explain the CB signal, said it was probably a prank or interference, but I knew better. That voice wasn't human, and those shapes in the corn weren't either. I delivered the equipment to the depot, my mind racing, and collapsed in a motel room, sleeping fitfully with the lights on. When I woke, I called my brother Dave, a farmer back in Nebraska. I told him a version of the story, leaving out the voice and the shapes, just saying I'd had a scare. He laughed it off, said the road gets to everyone eventually, but I could hear the worry in his voice. I thought about my dad who'd driven trucks before me, always saying the Midwest was America's heart, built on hard work and trust. I still believe that, but I avoid foggy nights on I-80 now. I got the truck's wiring fixed, started carrying a cross like my old man did, and keep driving because quitting isn't who I am. But sometimes when the fog rolls in and the CB hums with static, I hear that voice again taunting me to return to mile marker 47, and I pray I never find out who or what was waiting in that cornfield.